Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So I've got some good news and some bad news about gold and silver today. The good news is that the state of Florida is considering reinstating gold and silver bullion as legal tender. And in fact, the state of Florida is going to get a gold currency as early as January of 2025. The bad news that we'll delve into today is that it's not likely we're going to see any meaningful push towards sound money at the federal level anytime soon. In fact, there are currently politicians who are calling for the sale of U.S. gold reserves. And the reality is that any move at this point in this debt and deficit-based fiat currency system would necessitate drastically higher prices for both silver and gold if they were to be used as money once again, as they were for the majority of U.S. history. So we've got a lot to unpack in today's video. Let's get to it. Buy your gold and silver from SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. All right, so let's delve into some of the good news surrounding sound money first. The good news is that earlier this month, Florida's chief financial officer, Jimmy Patronis, announced that he is launching a study to see if gold and silver bullion could once again be used as legal tender in the state of Florida. Florida is a pretty big state, it's got a big population, and I think that it is positioned in a way where gold and silver bullion would be well received. Now, over the past several years, there are several states who have gotten on the gold and silver legal tender bandwagon. That includes Louisiana, Texas, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Utah. These are among the states that have passed legislation to recognize gold and silver for what they are, which is money. And this guy Patronis, based on what he is saying, seems like he really does understand the role that gold and silver play. This is a quote from him. He says, "This is an exciting initiative that has the potential for enormous growth in our state. Gold and silver have been trusted assets for thousands of years, and it makes perfect sense to use them as legal tender." He is launching the study to determine the best way to get it done. And some of the possible outcomes of future legislation could be that gold and silver bullion would not be taxed as personal property, and that the purchase and sale of gold and silver bullion would not give rise to state tax liability. So this could include waiving sales tax on gold and silver bullion purchases. It could also mean no capital gains tax, at least at the state level. And that is a big step in the right direction towards making gold and silver even more effective as inflation hedges than they currently are. In another positive development, in January, Florida will be the next state to get a launch of Goldbacks. And if you're not familiar with Goldbacks, they are actually a physical gold currency that is hyperfractional. The one Goldback note, which you see right here, is a 1/1000th troy ounce gold note. And the Florida Goldback series is quite exciting. I have seen some of the artwork, and it is really amazing. It's an upgrade from these original Goldbacks in a big way. The notes are going to look amazing. There will also be 3 new denominations of Goldbacks as part of this launch. Florida will be getting a 1/2 Goldback note, a 2 Goldback note, and a 100 Goldback note. So Goldback continues to expand, and I think right now, honestly, this is probably the most viable hard money currency out there. Florida will be the 7th state that Goldback will be operating in, so this is definitely exciting news. And the new denominations, I was thinking it's pretty interesting. The 1/2 Goldback, you might think that that is really kind of unnecessary. A 1 Goldback note already is quite fractional, 1/1000th of a troy ounce of gold. The half Goldback note will be 1/2000th of a troy ounce of gold. But there is an analogy which really makes this make a lot of sense. The U.S., for most of its history, used gold and silver as legal tender. And in the previous gold and silver-based monetary system in the U.S., there were coins, gold coins, the biggest of which was a $20 gold coin, which wasn't exactly 1 ounce. Those coins contained about 0.9675 troy ounces of gold, but let's just call them 1 troy ounce gold coins for the sake of this analogy. If you think about it, back in the day, if you had those $20 gold coins, that means that 2,000 pennies or 2,000 cents was equivalent to roughly 1 troy ounce of gold. And so that means that a 1/2 Goldback note, which contains 1/2000 of a troy ounce of gold, is basically the equivalent of the penny of that time, which was the smallest unit of monetary exchange, the smallest unit of currency. And I mean, if you think about it in context of today's money, how many of you would pick up a penny you see on the street if you only had to get 2,000 of them to swap out for a troy ounce of gold? Of course, with the way that the currency has been debased at this point, picking up a penny is almost kind of a fool's errand because the purchasing power is so minimal. But having a 1/2 Goldback note, I think, really does kind of flesh out the Goldback ecosystem, and it just makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, having the 100 Goldback note is perhaps a nicer way to store value. You know, you get 10 of those and you've got an ounce of gold instead of having to stack 1,001 Goldback notes to achieve the same level of purchasing power. But all of this talk of a return to gold and silver as legal tender, it's all well and good, but the sad reality is that it is very unlikely that we will be returning to sound money in the US at the federal level anytime soon. And it wasn't that long ago that we actually had a monetary standard based on the precious metals. It was in 1964 when silver was pulled from the coinage. And then in 1971, that was when Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. So it hasn't been that long, but since that removal of the convertibility of the dollar into gold back in 1971 by Nixon, there has just been an absolute enormous debasement of the dollar. Vast quantities of fiat currency have been created. At this point, if you take the M2 money supply as reported by the Federal Reserve, it's around $21.4 trillion, slightly higher than that actually, but let's just call it 21.4 trillion. If you were to take that money supply and you wanted to back it by gold, well, the US has allegedly 261,498,926 troy ounces of gold in the official reserves. And you can leave me a comment down below if you think that we even really have that gold or not. But let's just go by the official figures. If you divide the money supply by that amount of gold, you would require a gold price of more than $81,000 in order to achieve that. And, you know, one of the things people say sometimes when we talk about a return to sound money is that there's just not enough gold. And there's always enough gold, especially if you have something like a Goldback, which is hyper-fractional gold, or perhaps you use something like the blockchain to make the gold even more divisible. But it just requires a sufficiently high price. But at this point, we have created really just an absolute enormous amount of fiat currency. And so you would need to see vastly higher gold prices if you wanted to back up the money supply by gold. And of course, that would also mean vastly higher prices for silver as well. I mean, how high, I'm not really sure. If we kept it at the current ratio of close to 80-1, I guess you'd need about $1,000 silver in order to, have that gold and silver backed monetary system. But it could be even higher than that, especially if we return to something like historical gold and silver ratio. But again, that's not going to happen anytime soon, because that would mean that the days of massive deficit spending and endless debt creation would be over, and very unlikely any politicians are going to support that. In fact, right now, we're going to have the crypto president, Donald Trump, inaugurated very soon. And there are politicians such as Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis, who is supporting the idea of selling the gold that the U.S. federal government does have, or at least liquidating some of that reserve, in order to buy Bitcoin. So swapping out the remaining hard money currency that the government does have supposedly in stockpiles and purchasing digital tokens. That's her plan to strengthen the U.S. currency and reform the U.S. monetary system. But feel free to leave me a comment down below if you think that that's a good idea. To me, it seems like for some reason, the state of Wyoming just generates all of these terrible ideas, especially Republican senators and representatives. You got Cynthia Lummis calling for selling gold for Bitcoin. And it was fairly recently you had Liz Cheney, a former representative from Wyoming, who endorsed the presidential campaign of Kamala Harris. So I don't know what it is with Wyoming, maybe something in the water there. Feel free to leave me a comment about that down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on these plans by these Wyoming politicians. So right now it's kind of a mixed bag. There are some voices at the state level calling for a more rational monetary policy and monetary system. And yet at the federal level, it seems highly unlikely that there will be any push towards precious metals as money anytime soon. But if you ask me, such a move is inevitable, although we might have to see things get a lot worse before that eventually happens. But leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think about the topics we covered in today's video. If you want to see more videos about gold and silver, check out the video popping up on your screen right now, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking. Smart Silver Stacker, out.